episode number 150 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have Adam Candee. I have Brad Allen. You can follow Adam on the Twitter machine at Adam Candee. That is 2 E's, no Y. And you can follow Brad at Brad Allen NFL. If you hate yourself, you can follow me at Matt Brown M2. We're on all the places that you get podcasts, so go in. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google. Please go in, subscribe, rate, and review. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the little subscribe button, like the video. Let us know in the comment section whose accent on this particular episode you happen to like the best. We are going to talk some DraftKings CFO stuff where we're going to figure out, hey, what's going on there. We're going to talk some Fanatics stuff as well, a company that maybe you will be hearing a lot more about on this podcast in the coming months. We'll do our state wrap up as we always do, but let's go ahead and Adam, let's talk about the episode 150 here.
Yeah, let's just get the scene, I feel, properly set here. I know that we have listeners from various parts of the country, various parts of the globe. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, a day after some absolutely horrific things happened in the world. I'm not trying to skirt around the fact that it's the school children in Texas. I just don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about it, but I want to say this much. You don't come here for world news or politics or any of those discussions, but it also feels like one of those times in the world that we acknowledge that we know the greater context in which we're talking about the things inside our little candy shop bubble of sports betting and iGaming in general. So, I just wanted to kind of get that on the record at the top here.
No, absolutely. And, as you said, I think everybody certainly appreciates the acknowledgement here and understands that maybe they're coming here to try to escape for a little bit of all of the craziness and everything that goes on in this world of ours. And obviously, not even to sit here and do the whole thoughts and prayers thing, because it's far past that at this point. So, Brad, let's go ahead and kick things off here at the top and talk a little bit of former, maybe still very relevant media person. I don't really know. I don't really consume a lot of her content, but Josina Anderson and one of the prominent offshores.
So we noticed this last week. Josina, I think she used to work for ESPN. Now, in her Twitter profile, she says a CBS Sports insider. And you scroll through her Twitter and it's standard, NFL reporter stuff. Quotes from OBJ, chats with Adrian Peterson. And then we noticed that she'd started tagging at Bovada official at the bottom of just, standard news tweets. And then further down, she was doing a show called Bovada Live with Adrian Peterson. And obviously this stood out a little bit because it's sort of interspersed. It's here's my work at ZBS, here's Bovada, go look at Bovada. And I suppose it's relevant because, CBS has a huge advertising deal, hundreds of millions probably, with Caesars/William Hill. And, here's one of its talent, although I believe Josina is a third-party contractor rather than directly hired by CBS. But essentially it looks like, CBS talent is also promoting offshore sportsbooks. And that's been one of the biggest complaints over the last couple of years from regulated books, is that people just simply do not know the difference. Some of that's with the media. And I suppose, that's what I tried to find out when I reached out to Josina. I think it's important to say it's not meant to be a witch hunt. I'm not trying to be like,
Sure.
We got you. But my initial question was, did you know this was an offshore sports book? And I didn't hear back initially. But more recently, I would say, it's important to say that she's not doing anything illegal. I think there's probably other TV personalities for ESPN that are also promoting offshore. But from our part, we thought important to point out, like, this is the problem. This is one of the exact problems that needs to be highlighted to kind of help people discern what is illegal and what is legal.
So, Adam, this problem is kind of like twofold, right? It's one, not only her probably doing her due diligence and kind of seeing what product she is endorsing and or helping promote. And then two, like, yeah, even if you aren't officially an employee of said company, if you are doing work for said company, if you are representing said company in whatever it might be, videos, podcasts, even written work, there's bylines and things like that. It seems like there's almost an onus on that company as well, right? To go in and say like, hey, Josina, you gotta knock that off, right? I mean, this isn't this isn't where we want to be promoting our brand and our stuff anyway. And two, mainly because, hey, we got these really fat advertising deals with these other friends, and we don't want to piss these friends off. So, I mean, I think there's a couple of people here that you can kind of look at and just say like, why is this happening?
And as we get into the discussion of, are you an employee, are you a contractor, et cetera, I'll say this much. When I went to post the story and I searched the Associated Press Newswire for a photo, the photo is of Josina Anderson with a CBS Sports mic flag interviewing Eric Weddle after the NFC Championship game. This is someone who's been featured prominently in the coverage of CBS of the NFL recently by that fact. So you're absolutely right that the problem is multifaceted, Matt. And I think it goes back to what Brad said at the jump, that there is still massive confusion, not just among bettors, but among media. And there's massive confusion among media with what's offshore, what's legal, because in the 25-year void between PASPA being enacted and PASPA falling, the offshore sportsbooks did a pretty fantastic job of marketing themselves and going from a PR perspective after big reporters and getting their odds into the national consciousness, right? It was not unusual, wasn't then, it isn't now, to see odds from MyBookie, BetOnline, right, Bovada, et cetera, cited by mainstream media, who often, when you point it out to them, say, oh, I didn't know. Right? We obviously know that difference quite well, but a lot of folks don't know that. And so what Brad said about contacting Josina Anderson, I think he did a great job of reaching out not only to Josina, but to CBS and to Caesars as well. None of them responded with comment, but the response, I think, has been in the pudding, because Josina has not tagged Bovada at any point since Brad contacted her asking that question, even though we didn't get a response.
And Brad, like you said, I mean, this wasn't like a hey, gotcha moment or anything like that. You're genuinely curious as you reach out stuff like this to say, hey, do you even have an idea of what you're promoting? Because listen, Josina is at least a big enough character here. And Adam, I think this is something you could say as well. This might have been something like her agent brings to her, right? Like it's like, hey, this company says they're going to pay you whatever, $5,000 a month to do 10 tweets a month or something or whatever. And like, if someone says, hey, you're going to pay you $5,000 to put out 10 tweets, I'm probably, if I don't know any better too, I'm probably gonna be like, yeah, sounds good. $500 a tweet, I'm in, And so it's Brad, I think it's like, it was more of just an educational type thing, right? Where you were just looking to say like, hey, did you even really know what you're doing here?
Yeah. And from what I understand, it was set up via a third party. It's not like, it was a third party marketing company set this up. It's not like Bovada came to her and said, let's do this. And I suppose the other point there is, the reason I guess we wrote about Josina and we saw Josina is she's probably the biggest name that's actually doing it. As was pointed out, it's not just her doing it, but unfortunately she's the biggest name. That's a good and a bad thing for her, which is why I guess she was singled out in this story. So yeah, well, it looks like it may have stopped anyway. So I guess whether that was Caesars leaning on CBS leaning on her, I don't know. But perhaps a positive outcome. Who knows?
Yeah, when you take a look, I mean, over on Instagram, nearly 100,000 followers for her over there, and then over on the Twitter machine as well. Hundreds of thousands of followers. So yeah, it's certainly a big platform for a company like MyBookie. And then for Bovada, and then Adam, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago here on the pod. We were like, when there were some specifically named companies that were being targeted for, hey, we need to do something about these specific companies, it does go back to, we understood why it was those specific companies, and this is just yet another reason for us to kind of point and go, oh yeah, see, this is the reason why people want to go after Bovada.
Well, and what you're referencing is that AGA letter that was sent to the Department of Justice that called out Bovada, among others, as asking for the DOJ to help with a federal crackdown, which we debated the merits of that on this podcast. We're not going to get into it as much at this point, but it just goes to show how much confusion there is out there. And, Josina Anderson is a name big enough that I think that whether it's 100,000 followers, a few 100,000 followers, it's someone with reach, right? It's someone who is identified, at least by people who have consumed a lot of sports media, as this is someone ESPN used to feature pretty prominently. So someone CBS Sports is still featuring. And so it's less a matter of the individual and more a matter of the reach in the long run, because what we're looking at here is the legal market still trying to compete to clear up the difference that these other companies are very intentionally trying to keep muddy, right? I mean, Brad can attest to this. I'm sure you can too, Matt, that we get emails still all the time. Even here at Legal Sports Report, we get emails from MyBookie. We get emails from these PR folks trying to get us to cover what they do, which, I mean, we can kind of laugh to ourselves, but it shows the reach that their PR still has and what they are still able to do in terms of influencing the general public as to what's legal and what's not.
Adam, when we talk about Jason's and DraftKings, we typically talk about the Robbins version, but this is the Park version over there at DraftKings. And he had some comments on just kind of the overall landscape of the industry as we continue to move forward.
Truthfully, I put my name next to this to talk first just because I like hearing myself talk, but these are all Brad's stories, so I'm going to turn it over to him pretty quickly to flesh this out. But yes, DraftKings CFO Jason Park appeared at an event last week where he was discussing the future of the U.S. sports betting market. And what he discussed is something that is not new to us on this podcast. We have had this discussion many times before. What I thought was notable is that someone from within the game and someone from a position that could be in an acquiring spot or a to-be acquired spot, we've discussed that as well, with DraftKings was doing the talking and saying that smaller share market operators he expects over the coming years to, quote, throw in the towel. Now, does throw in the towel mean sell? Does it mean fold? Does it mean be stripped for parts? We don't know exactly, what that is. But we've had this discussion, right? We've had the talk of what is going to happen if you are a single-digit share operator in a market that is increasingly becoming consolidated among FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, and Caesars. What is your path forward? What is your path to stand out? Is there a market left that you think you could make some sort of dent in that's going to get you into that top four for the long term? And it's not impossible to see when we hear companies like Caesars talking about pulling back the marketing spend and saying, oh no, we accomplished what we wanted to, right? Okay, we'll see if that holds up. You're the test case for it. But at the same time, when we do state revenue reports and say, yeah, in Pennsylvania, it's 80+% of the market among those four sports books, then it does bring up that reasonable question of what comes next for the smaller share operator. So, I'll let Brad get a little bit more into that because he's the one who fleshed out this story.
Yeah, Brad, I mean, look, this is something in the years that I've been in the gaming industry, right? I started out in poker, I was in DFS, and then before, all the while kind of still in the sports betting industry, we saw a ton of this in the poker industry, right? Like a small fish would come up, get like just enough of the market to where it was kind of like, okay, let's get rid of this person, and they get acquired and they move on. And then, as Adam even mentioned as well, some that were stripped for parts, where it was kind of like, hey, this upstart company came, they have really good software, they just have no liquidity, they can't keep going. So you buy the tech, right? Or you buy you buy the actual platform because, hey, that's some pretty good stuff that they've got going on there. So yeah, I mean, there are multiple different ways that this could all go down via M&A or just, let's take these people out. We kind of like what they've got from let's call it an in-game product, and we'll just use that on our stuff and move on from there.
Yeah, and that's probably the reason you always hear rumors or M&A rumors about companies like PointsBet, like BetRivers or Rush Street, because they are having those conversations. They do, especially now with the way the market is trending down. a lot of these companies are looking at a cash crunch. Even DraftKings itself, that was another thing that Park addressed, basically to have enough cash to turn profitable. Because some analysts, they say that concern that they will have to raise money again, that's in the share price. And, Park said we do have enough money to do that. But for companies, say, like PointsBet, one of these arguably in the long tail with a single digit, say 5% market share, that's also a concern. And is their way out to get bought by a DraftKings? And so, according to Park, the way he was describing it is, this is a great thing for us. He said their market share around, say, 25% is defendable with upside, was his quote. Either these companies get bought by DraftKings or they simply just drop away because they don't have the cash. So sort of he was spinning that as a good thing for them. Now, was he talking his own book somewhat? If you listen to suppliers and their investor calls, similar to Park here, if you listen to a Candee or a GAN or a company like that, they will say, a Playtech is another one who's talked about this, they will say, we think there's easily 30% of the market that's going to be carved up between the suppliers. That long tail will always remain, whether it's sort of tribal operators or more regional operators. They take the Florida Tennessee area or whatever. So it depends who you listen to, but I guess I would say what we've seen so far is that Jason Park is right. It is 80% between four, and the rest of you are clinging for scraps, and it's kind of going badly if you're in that long tail so far.
Adam, let me go off of rundown here and just ask you a question where you can just opine strictly, off of your gut feeling here. But is the reason anytime this talk comes up, it is always PointsBet, right? Like it's like every time we talk about, like, is a company going to get sucked up by somebody else? Like, we always point to PointsBet, and is that almost a compliment to them? Because it's like, hey, their menu's pretty good. Their app is pretty good. The product is pretty good. They have like enough market share to where they're relevant. They have a partnership, with NBC and all this stuff. So it's kind of like, that's kind of a compliment. I think people probably look at it whenever we keep saying like, PointsBet, and think like, wow, man, these guys are like really harsh on PointsBet. But more than anything, I think it's actually kind of a compliment to those guys.
I'll dig into that for a second and talk about why it's PointsBet and why it's maybe not some of the other operators that we've mentioned. I mean, we just threw out Fox Bet, Bet Rivers, etc. Okay, well, Bet Rivers, Rush Street Interactive is part of a much, much larger gaming conglomerate owned by Neil Bloom, and we talk about those operations differently than we talk about standalones like PointsBet, right? If Wynn says it's pulling back / potentially selling the interactive, we look at that differently than we look at PointsBet. FoxBet, as we discussed last week, that's all tied up in the Flutter / FanDuel lawsuit, and that's a whole other story as to the success or failure of PointsBet. And beyond that, we're really talking about what maybe Barstool, which is its own universe entirely with Penn, and then beyond that, it's really minimally impactful operators that we're discussing, right? Ones that don't really have any impact. And PointsBet has had some impact. They've also had a spend that's been commensurate with having that impact as well. So what have they done? Well, I think one of the things that Brad has written about and we covered at Legal Sports Report was the idea that they are testing out this sort of never down live bet technology, right, to try to reduce rejections. They acquired Manic with the idea that they were going to improve the in-play product and try to make that a better, more usable version of what a lot of people in the country have a lot of complaints about when it comes to live betting. So when we talk about a company that could be scooped up or stripped for parts, to use a little bit of a ham-handed term that I put out there, you look at a PointsBet and you say, okay, there are parts of this that others would be interested in. And look, I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit here. I mean, some of the discussions that Brad and I have had behind the scenes have said, when we look at the financials with PointsBet and the fact that this is another company where analysts had cash questions on one of its more recent investor calls, we say, how long is it sustainable at the pace that they're going?
I think also, I think they're at the center of a lot of these rumors because they're having these conversations. They're undoubtedly in a lot of these rooms going, would you want to buy us? Could we partner with you? So, I don't think that it's not a case of no smoke without fire, although it is a case of that.
Brad, let's take a look here at a company that, like I said, I think we are going to end up talking about a ton here over the next 18 to 24 months here on this podcast, and you guys are certainly going to write a lot of words about, and that's Fanatics. And if you aren't familiar with Fanatics, if you just go to their corporate website, they claim 80 million plus reachable fans that they have, 900 plus sports properties that they are partners with. They have offices. They have 50 different offices globally right now that they use for various things. And of course, they, outside of just, the betting stuff that we're going to talk about here, their bread and butter being collectibles and licensed products and things like that. And they're even getting into the NFT space as well, as they're going to create digital artwork stuff for Getty photos and things like that. So we're talking about a pretty major company here, a company that certainly is entrenched in the sports landscape, whether you actually buy collectibles, you even realized were coming from Fanatics or not or whatever. But I mean, they are certainly well there. With the sports betting thing, though, we haven't really gotten them in play yet, but they are a story that you just posted over there, backing this initiative in California, and maybe that is kind of their initial push into really, really getting things going here in the States.
Yeah, I mean, Fanatics is crazy. Like, obviously, we've written thousands of words about them. We've spoken about them for months, and they've announced nothing, right? They've announced no licenses. They've announced no tech plan, and so it came out this week. I think they've trademarked the Bet Fanatics name, so maybe they have a brand name at last. But this story we wrote was about California specifically, where they've given $12.5 million to that initiative to get California sports betting on the ballot in November. But the language of that initiative says you need to have 10 other US sports betting licenses. And so the sort of question we tried to answer here was, where are they getting 10 licenses from? Say they do get this passed, and California is ready to go live sometimes towards the end of 2023. How does Fanatics pick up 10 sports betting licenses? So I asked around people who do this for a living and said, is it doable? And the answer was probably not organically. You probably do not have time and money to go 10 different states, find 10 different partners, and just do this organically. You can perhaps do it if you get a head start. You buy someone with 5, 6, 7 licenses already, like perhaps a Play Up was a name that came up. Churchill Downs was another one that came up that's looking to sell some licenses. And that is one way for Fanatics to sort of get 5 in one go, and then you can pick up the other 5 perhaps organically.
So Adam, when we take a look here, we've always talked about Disney and ESPN, right, as kind of like the big fish that we still have out there. But if you take a look at these numbers, and I guess I've never really looked at the actual numbers, right? If they claim 80 million direct access to 80 million sports fans, so we understand they're a global company. So let's cut that number and say it's 40% of those are here in the United States. We are still talking about 30 million potential customers for a brand that sells things. It's not even like ESPN, where it's like there's direct access to the fan, but because and that they're sports fans and they're coming to your site to check scores and things like that. But Fanatics is selling memorabilia. Like, they are selling, collectibles. They are selling all this stuff where, like, the sports fan is actually willing to trade money for and all that. So I think, have we basically not been giving Fanatics enough credit here? Are they actually a sleeping giant that we have not really been talking about as a sleeping giant?
You can make the argument both ways, Matt. Let me start with what you're saying and say, okay, if you want to say that Fanatics is a sleeping giant because of the potential reach, because they went and got Matt King from FanDuel, who obviously helped to build what is the market leader in the U.S. in sports betting right now, because they have seemingly unlimited resources cash-wise because of the rest of that business, yeah, you can make a case and say that all of those ancillary things suggest that you have to take Fanatics very seriously. And I can also make you a case for why we have them, let's say, properly rated as to where they are right now. One, as Brad said, there is no anything. There's no anything there. There is no tech. There are no licenses. There is nothing for us to evaluate in terms of what this company is going to be. And so I'm going to name a couple of other cautionary tales in terms of valuing the ancillary too much. We just talked about two of them. One of them is Barstool. We've had the Barstool discussion repeatedly, right? All of this very fervent base that they have, all of these stoolies who have disposable income, who are willing to take commands from their favorite personalities, what's that going to turn into when it comes to sports betting? They claimed at one point to have 66 million users. Well, so far it's translated into not much, right? It's translated into single-digit share and, not nothing, but not much. And then I look beyond that and I look at the score, which told us repeatedly that it has this massive base of engaged sports fans who are coming to us for their content in terms of knowing about what's going on in the games. And yes, we've heard some good rumblings out of Ontario thus far, but their forays into the US have been zero impact, really. There's been nothing that the score has done thus far that has really moved the needle in the United States. Both of those companies now happen to be under the same umbrella with Penn National. So when it comes down to it, I think those are advantages for Fanatics in getting started, right? In making that initial push, in having the brand recognition. And then it's going to come down to, well, what is it that we're recognizing, right? What is the tech that we're recognizing? What is the product that they're going to put out there that is going to either be better or be differentiated?
Brad, you're as plugged in as anyone when it comes to this stuff. What is your gut feel on Fanatics' path into the United States? Who do you feel is the most likely acquisition target, or what do you think that the business model kind of plan is going to be for them?
I will say I am optimistic on what they can do. One, because it seems like everyone that's met Matt King is impressed. They say he's a very shrewd operator. And he's good at creative problem solving, which is essentially what he's tasked with here. He's got to bring the tech, he's got to bring the licenses, and he's got to build a team from scratch. But it sounds like from everyone that's spoken to him, he is the man to do that. I will also say they are taking this very seriously. Like, you go and look at their people page or their HR page, and they're hiring 60 roles. I think it's 40 actually. It's 40 sportsbook roles at the minute, and there is 20 or so on the engineering side. And someone one of my contacts who's also building some US sports betting stuff, he said he's taken a look at all the job specs, and he said he's very impressed. They're taking this very seriously, very long term, and doing it properly, essentially. So I would also say the patience they've shown so far is perhaps also encouraging. Like, they're not rushing this. We've seen some rushed attempts at this. Maybe Caesars is one that springs to mind with the way they handled that in New York. Just chuck a bonus and a product that didn't work out there. This is the opposite. This is, let's get everything precisely ready and do this slowly, because we are thinking 10 years down the road. And that's what Michael Rubin has said, the Fanatics president. And he's another one he's a very well thought of entrepreneur. That's how he's described to me as well. So yeah, to me, I would say, watch out. I think give them 5 years or whatever. I think they can be a podium operator in the US.
Adam, to kind of close things out here, I guess one thing that they do bring to the table here is an interesting cross-sell that nobody else has, right? So we talk about the cross-sell between DFS and sports betting. We talk to the cross-sell between some of these media deals and the sports betting side of things. Of course, poker, there's that as well, where you can kind of cross-sell. But the cross-sell of a potential customer that is willing to, again, buy a hat of a team or a jersey of a team, like you're an invested sports fan at that point, right? Like maybe even more than some other sports fans or something. So the cross-sell between someone who is already putting up money for something that has to do with sports is at least interesting, I think, from this aspect. And the other thing as well is maybe even a rewards program, not to give away free advice here or anything to the Fanatics people out there. I'm sure they've already thought about this, but I mean, make 10 bets on the Angels and get an Angels hat or something or whatever, like all these different things like that, I think is at least pretty interesting with this company.
Yeah. I mean, you do have some synergies there that make a lot of sense. I will say that idea is certainly being road tested by Caesars, by MGM in terms of how they're promoting rewards, right? At the beginning of football season, remember, everything we saw in terms of advertising for those companies had to do with the rewards, right? And I mean, I think you probably know this in Las Vegas. At one point, there was, coming off the freeway, there was a billboard about how much Caesars Rewards can give you, and MGM bought the billboard behind it and said, MGM Rewards giveth more. So like they're clearly trying to push this angle of, you know, what you can convert your sports betting activity into. Again, I still want to see how we take that person who's buying a hat and get them to become a lifetime value sports bettor that moves the needle to some degree. And I think the part we haven't mentioned in here that goes along with it is what's going to happen with iGaming, right? In the end, if we don't talk about iGaming, we're not talking about the full suite of product potential when it comes to any of these operators. And, you know, a number of the operators we've already discussed have gone into iCasino in some way, shape, or form. It's just that the market right now in the US isn't broad enough for anyone to really use that to stand out above the crowd nationwide.
Yeah. Of note there that you bring that up, the tab that you click on off of the Fanatics page, where, you know, off of their corporate page, it is Fanatics Betting and Gaming is the tab that you click off of their page there.
They did trademark Fanatics Casino, I believe, last year as well. So they have got that in mind. And just to your point quickly, Matt, that was one of the reasons FanDuel and DraftKings did so well out the gate, was because they had people who'd already given them their card details, right, to play DFS. They had those customers with the wallet ready, which arguably Fanatics does. I don't know exactly how it works with regulation, whether you can, like, whether it's the same wallet or you're going to have to sign up again. But they've definitely, as you said, they've got access to that wallet.
Adam, as always, my friend, take us home with some state roundups.
Let's ride on home with a second straight week of failure leading off the legislative recap, as Minnesota, which was a state I didn't have high hopes for from the beginning, got farther than I expected. Bill made it through the House, was actually approved in the Senate, and what was approved in the Senate was essentially poison. The tribes in Minnesota have major influence over gaming. They had supported the House version of the bill, which gave them some level of exclusivity. The Senate came along, included horse racing tracks, and then everything kind of came to a screeching halt there in the final days of the Minnesota session. We're still in conference in Massachusetts. Appointees have been put up from the House and the Senate side. There are, of course, enormous gaps to bridge when it comes to the two different versions from the House and Senate of sports betting. The House version, a lot more industry friendly than the Senate version, which includes a total ban on college betting and what appears to be a wholly unenforceable ban on sportsbook advertising in certain situations. So a long way to go in Massachusetts as their session goes on for a bit. We're waiting on North Carolina. They're back in session. We hear from our Pat Evans that committee hearing could happen as soon as early next week after Memorial Day to get them restarted. Remember, that bill has already passed the chamber, so we're already off to a running start there in North Carolina.
Guys, as always, everything that we talk about here on the podcast can be found over on LegalSportsReport.com, so be sure to go in and take in all of the great words that are getting written over there. And if you are watching us on the YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments section as well what you'd like us to talk about in the future. And if this is just a podcast version, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, all that, please go in, subscribe, rate, review. We really do appreciate that. If you want to follow Adam on the Twitter machine, Adam Candee, 2 E's, no I. You want to follow Brad Allen at Brad Allen NFL. For Brad, for Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.